I built an entire business for my girlfriend. Then she slept with my best friend and told me, "You're too boring to keep a woman like me." So I quietly shut down the company, wiped out her brand, and started seeing her sister. My name is Jason. I am 32 and I work as a product manager for a mid-sized fintech company based in Tampa, Florida. My schedule is predictable and heavy on long planning cycles, so I am used to thinking in quarters and years instead of days. I own a 3-bedroom house in a suburb about 20 minutes outside the city. Financially, I am stable, but not flashy. My girlfriend was Laura. She is 29, and we were together for 3 years. We did not share a mortgage, but she moved into my house about a year into the relationship, and we split utilities while I covered the mortgage because my income was higher. Laura worked as a freelance graphic designer when we met, mostly doing branding packages and social media visuals for small lifestyle startups around South Florida. She was talented but inconsistent with money. Some months were strong, others barely covered her expenses. She always said she did not want to design for other people forever. She wanted something that carried her name. About a year and a half ago, she started talking about launching her own skincare line. At first, it sounded like a normal side project. She had ideas about clean ingredients and minimalist packaging that would appeal to the beach-heavy Florida market. I treated it like any early-stage product concept. I asked about margins, supply chain, customer acquisition cost. She rolled her eyes at that. She said I was overthinking it, and that real entrepreneurs moved on instinct. Still, I believed in her drive. I helped her register the company under her name. I built the website myself over weekends. I used my savings to front the first manufacturing run because she did not have the capital. I handled contracts with suppliers since my job already involved negotiations. Officially, it was her brand. Unofficially, I built the operational backbone. The business actually started working. Within 8 months, she was making more than her freelance work ever brought in. She stopped taking client design jobs and started introducing herself as a founder. At dinners with friends, she would joke that I was her unpaid assistant. It got laughs. I did not push back because I assumed it was harmless. Looking back, that was the first mistake. The first shift in Laura happened slowly, so I cannot point to a single day where she changed. It was more like watching someone adjust their posture over months until you realize they are standing differently. When the revenue started coming in consistently, she stopped asking for input. In the beginning, we had weekly check-ins at the kitchen table. I would show her spreadsheets. We talked about customer retention and inventory turnover. After she quit freelance work, those conversations stopped. She said meetings felt corporate, and she wanted to keep things creative. She also started spending more. At first, it made sense. Better product photography, influencer gifting, a part-time assistant to handle customer emails. Then it drifted into things that were less directly tied to growth. A new car lease because founders should not drive something basic. Designer outfits for networking events in Miami. A PR consultant on a 3-month contract that did not produce measurable returns. I did not block her from making those decisions. The company was legally hers. I had set it up that way intentionally because I wanted her to feel ownership. My involvement was informal. I had admin access to everything because I built it, but on paper I was just the boyfriend who helped. The tone in our relationship shifted too. She started correcting me in front of people. If someone complimented the website, she would say she guided the entire vision and I just implemented it. If someone asked how she scaled so fast, she would laugh and say she had to teach me to think bigger. The jokes stopped feeling harmless. They were always framed as playful, but there was an edge. Once at a dinner with my friends, she said that ambition is attractive and some people are comfortable being safe. She did not look at me when she said it, but she did not need to. I addressed it the same night. I told her privately that I did not appreciate being minimized publicly. She said I was being sensitive and that confident men do not need constant credit. I did not escalate. I just said I would not sit through that again. That was the first boundary I set. It did not hold for long. Around that time, my best friend Mark started being around more often. We have known each other since college. He works in real estate development in Orlando and comes to Tampa a few times a month for meetings. He is louder than I am, more social, the kind of guy who walks into a room and immediately starts telling stories. Laura liked that energy. At first, I thought it was harmless. She said Mark understood hustle because he dealt with big deals and investors. I did not feel threatened. I have never been insecure about my friends interacting with my partner. What I did notice was how often she compared us. If Mark talked about a risky property acquisition, she would glance at me and say that some people are just wired to take big swings. If I pointed out potential downsides, she would smirk and say that is why I work in corporate. One weekend Mark stayed over because he had early meetings. The three of us went out to dinner, and Laura drank more than usual. She spent most of the night debating business with him. At one point, she said she could see herself expanding to national retail within a year if she had the right partner. I asked what that meant. She said she meant business partner. The look she gave me said something else. That same night, after Mark went to the guest room, I told her directly that the dynamic was off. I was not accusing her of anything physical. I was pointing out the pattern, the comparisons, the public jabs, the subtle alignment with him over me. She said I was imagining competition because I was threatened. She told me I was too structured and that women like her need stimulation. That word stuck. I told her clearly that if she wanted a different kind of man, she should say it instead of performing it. She laughed and said I was overanalyzing again. I did not argue. I went to bed and decided I would observe, not react. I have learned in product strategy that data beats emotion. If there was something real happening, it would surface. It surfaced faster than I expected. The data surfaced in a way I did not expect because I was not looking for it in a dramatic way. I was updating the back end of the website late one Tuesday night. Laura had been out at what she called a networking mixer in Miami. Mark texted earlier that day, saying he happened to be in the area for a site visit. I was not checking her phone. I was not following her location. What happened was simpler. Our business email was still synced to my laptop because I handled supplier communication. Around midnight, a hotel confirmation came through. It was addressed to Laura. 2 guests. 1 king bed. Downtown Miami. I stared at it longer than I want to admit. The booking time was 7:42 p.m. That was about an hour after she said the mixer started. I did not call her immediately. I checked the company calendar. No scheduled brand event the next morning. No retail meeting. Nothing that required an overnight stay. At 1:15 a.m. she texted that she might stay with a girlfriend in Brickell because it was late and she had wine. I replied that was fine and went back to the laptop. I called the hotel directly. I asked to confirm a reservation under her name. They would not give details, but they confirmed it was active. I did not drive to Miami. I did not create a scene. I went to bed. When she came home the next afternoon, she acted normal. She said the event was productive. I asked directly if she stayed at a hotel. She froze for half a second. Then she said yes, but alone, because she needed quiet to think about expansion strategy. I told her I saw the 2-guest reservation. She did not deny it after that. She shifted instead. She said I was making a big deal out of nothing. That adults can share space without it meaning betrayal. That I was too rigid to understand fluid connections. I asked one question. Was it Mark? She did not answer with words. The silence was enough. Then she said the sentence that ended the relationship in my head. She told me I was too boring to keep a woman like her. The interesting part is not that she cheated. It is what I did next. I did not yell. I did not ask for details. I did not try to win her back. The moment she said I was too boring to keep a woman like her, something settled instead of breaking. I told her we were done. Not temporarily. Not for space. Done. She blinked like she expected negotiation. When none came, she shifted again. She said I was overreacting. That it was one night. That successful people do not cling to outdated relationship rules. I reminded her that this was my house and solely in my name. I told her she had 24 hours to pack and find somewhere else to stay. I was clear that after that, I would change the locks. I followed it up with an email that same afternoon documenting the move-out deadline, so there would be no confusion later. She called me dramatic. I told her I was being decisive. Then I did something she did not anticipate. The company might have been in her name, but the infrastructure was mine. I owned the server hosting account. I built the payment processing pipeline under a merchant account tied to my LLC because it was easier at the time. The supplier contracts were negotiated by me and required my signature for volume pricing. I had never hidden that. She had simply never cared about the details. That evening I logged into everything and mapped dependencies. Hosting, payment processor, email marketing software, CRM, warehouse agreement, influencer affiliate dashboards. I did not delete anything impulsively. I exported backups. I documented credentials. I spoke to a lawyer friend the next morning to confirm it was within my rights to withdraw my personal assets and services from a company that was not contractually bound to me. Over the next week, I began unwinding it. I canceled the merchant account effective in 30 days. I notified the supplier that future purchase orders would require renegotiation without my volume guarantee. I transferred the website files to her with notice that hosting under my account would end on a fixed date. I did not sabotage. I withdrew support. Laura did not notice immediately because sales were still flowing. She noticed when payouts paused and customers started emailing about failed checkouts. That conversation was far less confident than the one in my kitchen. She was already staying at a short-term rental by the time the operational cracks started showing. I had changed the locks exactly 24 hours after our conversation, like I said I would. Her things were packed neatly by the front door when she came back with her sister to collect them. I was present the entire time. No shouting. No theatrics. 3 days later she called. Her tone was different. Less sharp. More controlled. She said payments were not processing and customers were complaining in the comments. She asked if something was wrong with the site. I told her nothing was wrong. I had sent written notice that the merchant account attached to my LLC would be terminated on a fixed date. That date had arrived. She said I could not just pull support like that. I reminded her that I was never an employee or contractor. There was no agreement locking me in. I had funded the initial production run from my personal savings. I had provided infrastructure under my own business accounts. All of that was voluntary. She accused me of trying to destroy her. I corrected her. I said I was removing myself. There is a difference. She said I was being petty because she chose someone more exciting. That word again. Exciting. I asked if Mark was planning to step in and rebuild the back end. She went quiet. Then she said he was not technical, but he believed in her vision. Belief does not replace payment processors. Within a week, her supplier contacted her about minimum order quantities. Without my volume guarantee pricing, her margins were cut in half. The PR consultant invoice came due. Influencers started asking about delayed affiliate payouts. She called again, this time angrier. She said I was ruining years of her work over one mistake. I reminded her that I built the structure that allowed those years to exist. Then she said something that shifted the story again. She told me Mark was not answering her calls either. When she told me Mark was not answering her calls, I felt something I did not expect. Not satisfaction, just confirmation. I had already stopped speaking to him. The night I confirmed the hotel booking, I sent him one message asking if there was anything he wanted to tell me. He replied the next morning with a generic line about adults making complicated choices. I did not respond after that. I blocked him and moved on. Laura, however, seemed genuinely surprised that he was distancing himself. She showed up at my office building unannounced that Friday afternoon. Security called up because she insisted it was urgent. I agreed to meet her in the lobby to avoid a scene. She looked tired. No makeup. Hair tied back. It was the first time in months she did not look curated for an audience. She said Mark told her he needed space because things escalated too quickly. He was not ready for a serious relationship. He had thought she understood that. I asked her what exactly she thought sleeping with him would lead to. She said she assumed two ambitious people would build something powerful together. That he would invest. That he would help her scale nationally. I reminded her that Mark flips properties. He does not run e-commerce operations. She said I was being cold. I said I was being accurate. Then she asked if I could temporarily reconnect the payment processor while she figured things out. Just for a few weeks. She said the brand reputation was at risk. That customers were complaining publicly. I told her no. Not because I wanted revenge, but because reattaching my LLC to her liabilities after a betrayal would be irresponsible. If chargebacks spiked or suppliers went unpaid, it would trace back to me. She said I was proving her point. That I lacked passion. I told her passion without loyalty is just chaos. She stood there for a moment like she expected me to soften. I did not. As she walked out of the lobby, I blocked her and realized something else. Her sister had been the one helping her move out. And unlike Laura, her sister had not laughed at me once. Her sister's name is Emily. She is 27 and works as a pediatric nurse at a hospital in Clearwater. Practical job. Long shifts. No interest in startup culture or influencer events. We had always been friendly, but not close. She would come to family dinners and mostly observe. The day Laura moved out, Emily did most of the physical work. She carried boxes without commentary. When Laura started making comments about how intense I was being, Emily told her to focus on packing. That was the only time she pushed back, but it was noticeable. A few days after the office lobby incident, Emily texted me. She said she did not want to be in the middle, but she felt I deserved to know that Laura had been talking to Mark for months before the hotel night. Not physical at first, just late calls, private jokes, complaints about me being predictable. I thanked her for telling me. I did not ask for more detail. There was nothing to salvage. She apologized on behalf of her family for the way things unfolded. I told her she did not owe me anything. Adults make their own choices. Over the next 2 weeks, Laura's brand unraveled publicly. Customers posted screenshots of failed payments. Influencers removed affiliate links. Without inventory financing, she could not restock bestsellers. Negative reviews started appearing. I did not comment anywhere. I did not expose her. I did not tell mutual friends the full story unless asked directly. Mark never reached out again. One evening, Emily asked if I wanted to grab coffee. She said she had been dealing with the fallout at family gatherings and needed neutral ground to talk. I hesitated for about a minute before agreeing. Not because I was trying to start something, because I wanted closure that did not involve chaos. We met at a small place near the water. She looked exhausted from a 12-hour shift. No pretense. No performance. She asked me one question. Did you ever feel like you had to shrink so she could feel bigger? I answered honestly. Yes. That conversation lasted 2 hours. It was the first time in months I did not feel like I was defending my stability. And that is when the situation became more complicated. I want to be clear about something before people jump to conclusions. I did not pursue Emily out of revenge. I did not message her first with some calculated plan to hurt Laura. If anything, I was cautious to the point of overcorrection. After that first coffee, we did not text daily. We did not flirt. We talked maybe once a week. Mostly about normal things. Her hospital stories without violating privacy. My work projects. Neutral ground. What changed was how calm it felt. Emily does not talk about ambition as performance. She works 12-hour shifts, comes home tired, and repeats it the next day. There is no audience. No curated image. She does not measure value by who is watching. About a month after Laura moved out, her company officially paused operations. The website went dark. Social accounts stopped posting. I know because mutual friends mentioned it, not because I was checking. Laura tried once more to contact me through a new email address. She said I sabotaged her life, that if I had supported her through one mistake, none of this would have happened. I did not respond. The truth is simpler. I removed my infrastructure. The rest collapsed because it was never as independent as she claimed. Emily and I ran into each other again at a family birthday gathering for their mother. I debated not going, but her mom had always treated me kindly and invited me directly. I went for an hour. Laura avoided eye contact. Mark was not there. At one point, Laura pulled Emily aside, and they argued quietly in the kitchen. I did not hear the words, but I saw the dynamic. Laura pointing. Emily standing still. Later that night, Emily texted me. She said Laura accused her of betraying family by talking to me. I asked Emily if she was comfortable continuing to see me, even casually, knowing the tension. She said she was tired of living according to Laura's emotional storms. That was the first moment I realized this might become public and irreversible. About 2 weeks after that family gathering, Emily came over to my house for dinner. Nothing dramatic. I cooked. We ate at the kitchen table where Laura and I used to do business reviews. The difference was there was no performance in the room. We talked directly about what this would mean. Emily said she had spent most of her life cleaning up after Laura's emotional decisions, covering shifts, smoothing family arguments, taking the quieter role so Laura could be the loud one. She was done doing that. I told her I would not move forward unless she was fully comfortable with the consequences. I was not interested in secrecy. If we dated, it would be openly. No hiding. No triangulation. She agreed. The next weekend, we went to a public art event in Tampa. Nothing intimate. Just visible. A mutual friend saw us. By the following Monday, Laura knew. She called from a blocked number. I answered once because I assumed it might be business-related. It was not. She said I was predictable in the worst way, that I could not attract someone new, so I settled for her sister, that I was trying to hurt her because I could not compete with Mark. I let her finish. Then I said something I had not needed to say until that moment. I did not choose your sister to compete. I chose her because she does not need an audience to feel valuable. She told me I was destroying her family. I responded calmly that she made her choices. I made mine. Then I hung up and blocked that number too. It has been 8 months now. Emily and I are still together. Slow. Stable. No brand launches. No dramatic speeches about ambition. She works her shifts. I work mine. We eat dinner without anyone trying to win. Laura's company never relaunched. Mark moved on to another city for a development project. I have not spoken to him since. If being boring means consistent, loyal, and unwilling to finance my own disrespect, I am comfortable with that label. Some people confuse chaos with excitement. I do not. Hello. I called off my wedding while my fiancée was on vacation with her ex after she told me. It's just a trip between friends. Stop being so insecure and controlling. 5 weeks later, her phone call completely caught me off guard. Hi, I'm Mateo, 32. I work as a logistics analyst for a shipping company in Valencia, and my weeks are usually spreadsheets, port schedules, and late calls with people in other time zones. I'm not rich, but I'm steady, and I'm the type who pays bills early and keeps receipts. My fiancée is Laura, 29. We've been together 3 years, engaged for 8 months, and we rent a 2-bedroom apartment together. We split chores, and up until recently, I thought we split the stress pretty evenly too. The wedding was set for early summer. Not huge, about 70 people, but not cheap either. Laura wanted it to look expensive without being called expensive. She had opinions about everything, down to the thickness of the invitation paper and whether the chairs looked too basic in photos. I can handle opinions. What got old was the way she delivered them, like every vendor was lucky she was even considering them. I agreed to take overtime because it felt cleaner than debt. My company was short-staffed, so overtime was basically unlimited if you were willing to live at your desk. I did it. Extra evenings. A couple Saturdays. I told myself it was temporary and it was for us. Laura said she appreciated it, but her actions were more like she appreciated the results. She'd ask what I made that week and then immediately bring up upgrades. Better flowers. A bigger bar package. A different photographer because the one we booked had a vibe issue. If I hesitated, she'd roll her eyes and say I was acting poor. At home, she was on her phone constantly. Not in a normal scrolling way. More like quick tilts of the screen when I walked by, then bright smiling at something, then going flat when I asked what was so funny. She also started dressing up more for random errands. Full makeup to go pick up groceries. Perfume on a Tuesday afternoon when she said she was just meeting a friend for coffee. I didn't accuse her of anything because I didn't actually have anything, and I'm not interested in being the guy who interrogates his partner like a cop. But I started noticing patterns, and once you notice patterns, you either ignore them or you start keeping track. Last week, I came home after a 12-hour shift and saw her laptop open on the couch. A notification popped up and vanished fast, but I caught the name. Nico. I know that name because Nico is her ex. The one she calls toxic. The one she says she learned her lesson from. The one she promised she had blocked everywhere. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, and Laura walked in from the kitchen and snapped at me for hovering like a weirdo. I told her I was just tired, which was true, but now I can't stop thinking about why an ex who is blocked would be popping up on her screen at all. The next morning, I didn't bring it up. I made coffee, packed my lunch, and left like normal. Laura barely looked up from her phone. She asked if I could send her the login for the wedding venue portal because she wanted to double-check the seating chart again. Not because anything was wrong, just because she likes to circle problems until she invents one. At work I tried to focus, but my brain kept replaying that notification. Nico, a name that should not exist in our life anymore. Around midday, Laura texted me a list of things she wanted to upgrade. A different cake tasting because the one we tried was too plain. Linen napkins instead of paper. A photo booth because her cousin's wedding had one and it looked fun. I replied with a simple "we can talk tonight." She sent back a thumbs down emoji like I was her annoying employee. I got home late again. Laura was in the bedroom with the door mostly closed. Not fully shut, just enough to signal do not enter. I could hear her laughing, the kind of laugh she does when she is trying to impress someone. When I walked past, the laughing stopped. She opened the door a minute later and came out with that fake casual face. She told me she was on the phone with her friend B, and then immediately asked why I was looking at her like that. I said I wasn't. She shrugged and said whatever, and then asked if I had picked up the deposit receipt for the florist. I reminded her I paid it online last week. She rolled her eyes and said I know. I just like having paper copies because you forget things. That was a new thing too. Little jabs about my reliability while I was basically funding the whole production. After dinner, she took a shower and left her phone on the counter. I didn't grab it. I didn't need to. I'm not proud of the thought that came next, but I'm also not going to pretend I'm above it. I looked at her laptop again. I didn't open her messages. I didn't need to hack anything. She had left a tab open with her email, and there was a confirmation from a restaurant I recognized. Not one she and I ever went to. A reservation for 2. The name on the reservation was Laura. The note said anniversary table if possible. Anniversary. I checked the date. It was for the next night, when she told me she was going to a work dinner. My stomach went cold, but my face stayed calm. I took a photo of the screen with my own phone. Then I closed the laptop exactly how I found it and went to the living room like nothing happened. When Laura came out of the bathroom, she was in a good mood. Too good. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if my overtime check hit yet. I said it would on Friday. She smiled and said, "Perfect. Then we can finally lock in the last payments and stop stressing." I nodded. Inside my head, something clicked into place. Not the dramatic kind. The practical kind. The kind that makes you start thinking in lists. Vendors. Deposits. Refund windows. What is cancelable and what is not? I didn't confront her that night. I just let her talk about chair covers and lighting while I quietly decided I was not going to marry someone who had an anniversary dinner booked with her ex behind my back. The next day, I worked like normal, but I paid closer attention to the clock than usual. Lara's reservation was for 8 in the evening. She had told me the work dinner started around 7. Around 6:30, she texted me that she would probably be late because her team decided to try a new place across town. She added a laughing emoji and said, "Wish me luck surviving 3 hours of office gossip." I replied with a simple thumbs up. Then I opened the photo I took of her laptop the night before. The restaurant was not across town. It was 15 minutes from our apartment. That detail mattered to me more than the cheating itself. Cheating is already bad. Lying badly while doing it is worse. I finished my shift and drove home instead of heading toward the restaurant. I wanted to see what she did when she thought nobody was watching. At 7:15, I parked down the street from our building. Our apartment windows faced the road, and the living room lights were on. At 7:25, the front door opened, and Laura walked out. Work dinner Laura looked very different from the Laura I saw that morning. She was wearing the red dress she usually saves for weddings and formal events. Full makeup, hairstyled. The perfume she only uses when she wants attention. She checked herself in the reflection of her phone screen before locking the door. Then she walked toward the corner and called a ride. No hesitation. No rushing. She looked excited. I waited about 10 minutes before starting the car. Not because I was trying to follow her like a detective. Honestly, I just wanted confirmation that my brain was not inventing a story out of a single email. The restaurant was easy to find. Valencia is not a giant city, and the place was popular enough that the outside tables were almost full. I parked across the street and waited. At 8 on the dot, Laura stepped out of a car and walked toward the entrance. A man was already standing there. I recognized him instantly, even though I had only seen photos before. Nico. He looked exactly like the type Laura used to complain about. Good hair, tight shirt, the kind of smile that works on people who want to be impressed. They didn't greet each other like distant acquaintances. They hugged the kind of hug that lasts a little too long for people who supposedly hate each other. Then they went inside together. I sat in the car for about 5 minutes after that. Not angry, not shaking, just very calm. Because at that point the situation was simple. My fiancée had an anniversary dinner with her ex while I was working overtime to pay for the wedding she kept upgrading. So I drove home and started opening every wedding contract we had saved on my computer. Most people think the worst moment is catching someone cheating. For me, it was the quiet hour after. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and started opening contracts. Venue, catering, photographer, flowers, DJ, rentals. Each one had its own terms about deposits and cancellation windows. The venue was the biggest one. 30% paid up front. Another 20 due 2 months before the date. We were still just inside the window where the second payment had not been processed yet. That mattered. I made a simple list on paper. Vendor name, deposit amount, refund policy, cancellation contact. It felt weirdly similar to work. Just a problem with numbers and deadlines. Around 9:30, Laura texted me. She said the work dinner was dragging and she might grab a drink after with the team. She added a tired emoji like she was suffering through it. I looked at the message for a few seconds, then put the phone down. 10 minutes later, I emailed the venue coordinator. I kept it short and professional. Personal circumstances. Wedding canceled. Please confirm refund amount based on the contract terms. Next was the photographer. Their deposit was non-refundable, but the date could be released if notice was given early enough. I sent the same message. Catering was a partial refund situation depending on timing. We were still far enough out that it was mostly safe. By the time I finished the third email, my brain had fully switched into logistics mode. I wasn't thinking about Laura sitting in that restaurant laughing with her ex. I was thinking about how much money I could recover before anything became final. At 10:15, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Laura. She asked if I could transfer €2,000 from our joint savings to the wedding account because the decorator needed confirmation for upgraded lighting. That message actually made me laugh. Not loudly, just a quiet short laugh that surprised even me. While she was having an anniversary dinner with Nico, she was still actively spending my overtime money on the wedding she apparently didn't take seriously enough to stay loyal for. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened the decorator contract and checked the cancellation clause. Non-refundable once final design approval is submitted. I logged into the vendor portal and saw that Laura had already approved the upgraded lighting package earlier that afternoon. Of course she had. At that point, the last piece of doubt disappeared. This wasn't confusion or mixed feelings or some emotional mistake. This was someone fully comfortable living two different lives at the same time. So I finished sending the rest of the cancellation emails. Then I logged into the wedding website and changed the password. Once the emails were sent and the website password was changed, the apartment felt unusually quiet. Not peaceful, just empty in a practical way, like a place you already know you are about to leave behind. I looked around the living room and realized something simple. Almost everything in the apartment was mine. The lease was in my name because my credit was stronger. The couch was mine from before we moved in together. The TV, the kitchen table, even most of the cookware came from my old place. Laura had brought clothes, cosmetics, decorations, and a collection of plants that she regularly forgot to water. So the next logical step felt obvious. I started gathering her things. Not in an angry way. No throwing or dramatic gestures. I grabbed two of the large storage boxes from the closet and carried them into the bedroom. Her side of the closet was easy. Dresses first, shoes second, handbags after that. I folded what made sense to fold and laid the rest flat. The boxes filled faster than I expected. While I worked, my phone buzzed again. Laura sent a photo of a cocktail. The caption said Team Survival Drink. The restaurant logo was visible on the napkin in the corner of the picture. The same restaurant from the reservation. She either didn't notice it or didn't care enough to crop it. I didn't reply. Instead, I moved to the bathroom and cleared half the cabinet. Makeup bags, hair tools, skincare bottles that cost more than my weekly groceries. Everything went into another box. The whole process took about an hour. By the time I finished, 4 boxes were stacked neatly by the front door. I also added the small decorative things she liked. Picture frames she bought. The throw pillows she insisted made the couch look less depressing. The framed wedding invitation sample she had hung in the hallway 2 weeks ago. Seeing that one almost made me pause. Almost. I took it off the wall and placed it on top of the boxes. Then I sat down at the kitchen table again and opened my laptop. The venue coordinator had already replied. Cancellation confirmed. Deposit partially refundable minus administrative fee. That single email saved me almost 6,000 euros. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the stack of boxes near the door. Laura still thought she was out having a fake work dinner while her fiancé waited at home. What she didn't know was that by the time she came back tonight, there would be no wedding left to come home to. Laura came home a little after midnight. I heard her outside the door first. The quiet clacking of her heels in the hallway, then the sound of keys in the lock. I was still sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, exactly where she had left me earlier that evening. When she walked in, the first thing she noticed was the boxes. 4 of them stacked neatly beside the door. Her coats folded on top. The framed wedding invitation sitting right at the front. She froze for about 2 seconds. Then her face twisted into irritation instead of confusion. She asked what the hell this was supposed to be. I told her calmly that I packed her things so she could take them tonight. That's when the attitude kicked in. She dropped her purse on the counter and started talking fast, the way she does when she thinks she can bulldoze a conversation. She said I was being dramatic. She asked if this was about her being late. She said normal people don't pack someone's belongings like a psycho just because of a work dinner. I didn't argue. I turned my laptop toward her and showed her the reservation confirmation email. Her eyes moved across the screen for maybe 2 seconds before she looked away. Then she rolled her eyes. Not panic. Not guilt. Just annoyance. She said Nico was just someone she ran into recently, and they decided to catch up. She said the anniversary note was probably something the restaurant added automatically. She said I was overreacting and embarrassing myself. I listened to the whole speech without interrupting. When she finished, I told her I had already canceled the wedding. That was the first moment she actually looked shocked. Her eyebrows went up and she asked what I meant by canceled. I explained it slowly. Venue, catering, photographer, website, everything. For the first time that night, she stopped talking. Then she asked the only question she seemed to care about. What about the deposits? I told her some were refundable, some were not. But the bigger point was that there wasn't going to be a wedding anymore. Her expression changed again, this time into pure anger. She said I had no right to make that decision without her. I reminded her that I was the one paying for most of it, while she was out celebrating an anniversary with her ex. The apartment went very quiet after that. Laura looked at the boxes again. Then she laughed in this short, sharp way and said I was acting like a jealous child. I shrugged and told her the boxes were ready whenever she wanted to take them. Laura didn't move toward the boxes. Instead, she crossed her arms and leaned against the counter like she was preparing for an argument she thought she could win. She said I was blowing something small into a huge problem. She repeated that Nico was just someone she met for dinner. She said adults are allowed to have conversations with people from their past. Then she added that if I wasn't so paranoid and controlling, I would understand that. That part didn't land the way she expected. I told her calmly that adults are also allowed to end engagements when their partner lies to their face. She scoffed and asked what lie I was even talking about. So I reminded her. She said work dinner. She sent a photo pretending to be with coworkers. She told me the place was across town. Meanwhile, she was dressed for a date at a restaurant 15 minutes away, meeting the one ex she claimed she had blocked everywhere. Laura waved her hand like I was listing minor inconveniences. She said it wasn't a big deal, and I was embarrassing myself by acting like a detective. Then she asked if I had followed her. I said yes. That made her shake her head like she was the reasonable one in the room. She said, wow, so now you're stalking me too. I didn't bother reacting to that. Instead, I told her something simple. If she had told me earlier that she wanted to reconnect with Nico, I would have ended the relationship immediately and saved us both months of planning. But she didn't do that. She let me work overtime to pay for a wedding while she scheduled anniversary dinners with someone else. Lara's expression hardened. She said I was twisting the situation and acting like a victim. She said nothing even happened between her and Nico. I nodded and told her that didn't actually change anything. Because the kind of person who sets up secret dinners with their ex while planning a wedding isn't someone I'm interested in marrying. Another long silence followed. Finally, she looked at the boxes again and asked where exactly she was supposed to go at midnight. I told her that part wasn't complicated. Nico seemed like a good starting option. For a moment, I thought Laura might argue again. Instead, she let out another short laugh, grabbed her phone, and walked straight to the door. Her movements were sharp and annoyed, like she was the one inconvenienced by the situation. She pointed at the boxes and asked if I seriously expected her to carry all of that alone. I told her I'd help bring them downstairs. Not because I felt generous, just because I wanted the situation finished quickly. Neither of us said much while we moved the boxes. The hallway was quiet, and the elevator ride was even quieter. Laura kept tapping on her phone the entire time, probably messaging someone. When we reached the building entrance, a ride was already pulling up to the curb. That answered the question of where she planned to go. We placed the boxes near the car. The driver stepped out and opened the trunk. Laura shoved the smaller bags in first, and then turned back toward me. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain anything. She just shook her head like I was the unreasonable one. Then she said I would regret overreacting like this once I calmed down. I told her I wouldn't. She rolled her eyes one last time and climbed into the car. The driver closed the trunk, got back behind the wheel, and the car pulled away. That was it. No dramatic scene. No shouting in the street. Just a quiet car disappearing down the road with 4 boxes and my now former fiancé inside. I stood there for a few seconds, mostly because the street felt strangely empty after the door closed. Then I went back upstairs. The apartment already felt different. Not better exactly, just clearer. I walked into the bedroom and noticed the closet looked half the size it did earlier that evening. First thing I did was sit on the couch and open my phone. Laura had already sent 3 messages. The first said I was insane. The second said we needed to talk like adults. The third said canceling the wedding without discussing it was financial abuse. I read them once. Then I blocked her number. After that, I blocked her on every app we used. Messages, social media, even the shared wedding planning group chat. The silence that followed was immediate. For the first time that entire day, there were no notifications, no arguments waiting to happen, no explanations expected from me. Just quiet. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because of stress or some dramatic emotional spiral. My brain was just already running through the practical aftermath. First thing I did was check my email. A few more vendor replies had come in overnight. The photographer confirmed the date had been released. Catering acknowledged the cancellation and explained the refund schedule. The DJ sent a short message saying they understood and hoped everything worked out. No drama, just business. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table again, going through everything one by one. Refunds, remaining balances, accounts that needed to be closed. It felt a lot like cleaning up after a project that got canceled halfway through. Around 9 in the morning, I started getting messages from people who weren't blocked. Lara's cousin messaged first, then one of her friends, then my own sister. Apparently, Lara had already started telling people that the wedding was suddenly canceled and that I had thrown her out of the apartment in the middle of the night. I wasn't surprised. People like Lara move fast when they want to control the narrative. My sister called me instead of texting. She asked if everything was okay and what actually happened. I told her the short version. I said Lara had dinner with her ex while pretending she was at a work event and that I canceled the wedding when I found out. My sister was quiet for about 2 seconds before saying, "Yeah, that sounds about right." She had never fully trusted Lara. Not because of anything dramatic, just small personality things that always rubbed her the wrong way. After the call ended, I sent a short message to both families in the wedding group chat. Nothing emotional, just facts. I wrote that the wedding had been canceled due to personal circumstances and that vendors had already been notified. I apologized for the inconvenience and thanked everyone who had planned to travel. Then I left the group. About 20 minutes later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered because sometimes vendors call from random lines. It was Lara. Not directly. She was using someone else's phone. The moment I heard her voice, I hung up and blocked that number too. Whatever she wanted to say at that point didn't matter anymore. The wedding was already gone. The apartment was quiet again. And for the first time in months, I didn't have to calculate how many extra hours I needed to work to keep someone else happy. The rest of that week settled into a strange kind of normal. Work stayed busy, which honestly helped. Logistics doesn't pause because your personal life collapses. Ships still arrive. Schedules still break. Someone still needs to figure out where containers are supposed to go next. During lunch breaks, I finished closing out the wedding situation. Most vendors were professional about it. The venue processed the partial refund. Catering confirmed the remaining balance was canceled. The photographer released the date without any issue. In total, I lost some money, but far less than I would have if I had waited another month. That alone confirmed I made the decision at the right time. Lara tried a few more ways to reach me during the first couple days. A second unknown number called once. An email came through from an address I didn't recognize that was clearly hers. The message said we needed to talk like adults and that I was destroying 3 years over nothing. I didn't respond. I blocked the email and moved on. A few days later, one of our mutual friends sent me a short message. Not gossip exactly, just an update. Apparently, Lara was already publicly back in contact with Nico. They had been seen together twice that week. According to the friend, Lara was telling people that the wedding ending was probably for the best because we were never really compatible anyway. That didn't bother me. If anything, it simplified things. Because it meant the version of the story she wanted people to believe was already drifting away from reality. Meanwhile, my reality was simple. The apartment was quieter. My schedule went back to normal hours instead of constant overtime. The money that used to go into a wedding fund stayed in my own account. About 2 weeks later, I took down the last leftover piece of the wedding planning. A folder on my laptop labeled June wedding. I looked at it for a second, then deleted it. No anger. No big emotional moment. Just a finished decision. Looking back, the part people keep asking me about is why I didn't argue more or try to work it out. The honest answer is simple. Once someone is comfortable lying to your face while you are building a future together, the future is already gone. All I really did was stop pretending it was still there. Bye-bye. Hello. I caught my fiancée cheating with her coworker right before I was about to surprise her with a $2,200 trip. I didn't confront her or cause a scene. I just disappeared from her life. Later, karma handled the rest. Her new guy crashed her car and ran off, and she eventually showed up at my workplace begging me for help. My name is Adrian, I am 31, and I work as a procurement analyst for a hospital network in Bristol. My weeks are structured, my hours are early, and I am the kind of person who books train tickets 2 months ahead just to save 12 pounds and avoid chaos. My fiancée was Nina, 29, and she worked in corporate sales for a software company across town. We had been together a little over 4 years and engaged for 8 months. We did not own a place together yet, but she stayed at my flat most nights, had drawers full of clothes there, and we had already started talking seriously about wedding dates, guest lists, and where we would live after. At the start, what I liked about Nina was that she was sharp. She could walk into a room and act like she already knew how everything worked. I am more methodical than charismatic, so her confidence balanced me out for a while. The problem was that after the engagement, that confidence stopped feeling like confidence and started feeling like contempt. She had a way of correcting people over tiny things, especially service staff, receptionists, and anyone she thought she could get away with speaking down to. With me, it came out differently. More private, more polished, but just as pointed. She started treating every disagreement like a performance review. If I forgot to answer a text while I was in a supplier meeting, I was unreliable. If I questioned a wedding expense, I was cheap. If I said I was tired and wanted a quiet Friday night, I was suddenly lacking ambition. She never screamed. That would have been easier to deal with. Instead, she used that calm, clipped tone that made every sentence sound like she was generously explaining my own shortcomings back to me. What kept me from walking earlier was that the relationship still made sense on paper. Same age range, same city, decent incomes, no dramatic history, no obvious red flags that would make friends pull me aside and tell me to run. Even when she was being difficult, there was always a plausible explanation. Stress at work, wedding pressure, her mother calling every day with opinions. It all sounded temporary. Around that time, I had booked a surprise trip for us to Lisbon. Flights, hotel, dinner reservation, the whole thing. It came to just over $2,200 once everything cleared on my card. I did not tell Nina because I wanted one clean moment that still felt good between us. Looking back, that was probably the last week I was still trying to prove the relationship could be saved by effort. 3 days before I planned to tell her, she said she had to stay late with her team for end-of-quarter reporting. That by itself was believable. What was not believable was how quickly she grabbed her phone face down when it lit up on my kitchen counter. Then she gave me this annoyed look, like I had inconvenienced her by noticing it. That was the first time I stopped explaining her behavior to myself. I did not go digging immediately. I know that sounds strange, but I have never been the type to grab someone's phone and start playing detective because I feel insecure. I also knew that once I crossed that line, whatever I found would force a decision. Up to that point, I still thought there was a chance I was reading too much into a bad week and a sour mood. That lasted less than 24 hours. The next evening, Nina was at my flat again, technically working from my kitchen table, which mostly meant clicking around on a spreadsheet while sending voice notes to friends and acting irritated every time I made a normal amount of noise in my own place. She had brought overnight things but was oddly restless the whole time, checking the time, reapplying lipstick for no reason, walking to the bathroom with her phone in hand even when she was just rinsing a glass. It was subtle enough that if I described it to someone, they could say I was being paranoid. But when you live around a person long enough, you notice when their routines stop matching their excuses. At around 8:30, she said one of her managers wanted the team back online for a late call. She packed in less than a minute. Laptop, charger, makeup bag, gone. No kiss goodbye, no normal small talk. Just this clipped thank you when I handed her the cardigan she forgot on the chair. She was already halfway out the door when I asked if everything at work was all right. She turned around and gave me a look I had started seeing more often. Not guilt. Annoyance. She said I was doing that thing again where I made her job sound suspicious just because I worked in a place where people still respected office hours. Then she left. That should have been the end of it for the night. But about 15 minutes later, I noticed she had left her tablet on my sofa. It was one of those thin work devices synced to her phone notifications. I honestly just meant to message her and tell her to come back for it before I went to bed. The screen lit up before I could even pick it up properly. A message banner came through from someone saved as Lewis S., followed by a second one almost immediately. The preview was not enough to prove anything outright, but it was enough to make my stomach drop because it was written with the kind of familiarity that does not belong to coworkers staying late on quarterly reporting. Not even close. I stood there longer than I want to admit, just staring at that screen like it might somehow rearrange itself into something innocent. It did not. Another message came in. Then another. By then, the problem was no longer whether I was imagining things. The problem was that I was about to find out exactly how stupid I had been. I picked up the tablet and unlocked it. Nina had given me the passcode months earlier when she asked me to order something for her online, and like most people who are not hiding anything at the time, she never changed it. I remember thinking that if the messages turned out to be harmless, I would probably feel like an idiot for even opening them. They were not harmless. Lewis S. was apparently one of the senior sales reps on her team. I knew the name vaguely because she had mentioned him a few times in passing, always in that dismissive tone she used when talking about co-workers she thought were less competent than her. According to her, he was average at best and lucky to still have a job. The conversation thread on the tablet told a very different story. It was not explicit in the sense of photos or anything like that, but it did not need to be. The tone alone made the situation obvious within about 10 seconds. They were joking about how ridiculous the office was that day, complaining about the same manager, and then sliding straight into plans for later that night. Not a group plan, not a team thing, just the two of them. What caught my attention was the timing. One of the messages from him said something along the lines of leaving the bar early so they could actually talk without her annoying fiancé blowing up her phone. That line was followed by a laughing emoji from her and a reply saying she would tell me she had another late work call. That was the moment something in my head shifted from confusion to clarity. The rest of the thread was basically confirmation of what I already suspected. They had been meeting up after work for at least a couple of weeks. Drinks first, then apparently ending up back at his flat a few times. The way they talked about it suggested it was already routine. There was one message that stuck with me more than the others. Lewis asked if she was worried I might find out. Her response was short and very confident. She said Adrian is predictable. As long as I act busy and slightly annoyed, he backs off. I remember reading that line twice. Not because I was shocked she had said it. At that point, the tone of the entire conversation had already made it obvious what she thought of me. What surprised me was how calm I felt after reading it. No rush of anger. No dramatic urge to call her or drive somewhere and start a confrontation. Just a very clear realization that the relationship was already over. And once that thought settled in, the next decision became much simpler. Once I finished reading the messages, I put the tablet back on the sofa and sat there for a few minutes thinking about logistics. The relationship itself was already finished in my head, but there were still practical things to sort out. Nina did not officially live in my flat, but she stayed there often enough that half her wardrobe was in my spare room. Her makeup, shoes, and random boxes had slowly spread into my space over the last year. If I ended things, I wanted it clean and immediate, not a drawn-out series of awkward visits. Around 10 that night, she walked back into the flat. She looked slightly surprised to see me still awake. Normally, I would already be getting ready for bed on a weekday. She dropped her bag on the chair and started talking about how exhausting her team was and how the call had dragged on forever. I let her finish. Then I picked up the tablet from the sofa and handed it to her. Her expression changed instantly. Not panic. More like the mental calculation someone makes when they realize the situation they planned for is not the one they are standing in anymore. I told her I had seen the messages from Lewis. I did not yell, and I did not insult her. I just explained that I knew about the last few weeks, that the relationship was over, and that she needed to collect her things tonight. For a moment, she tried to take the defensive route. She said I had invaded her privacy, and that work conversations could easily be misinterpreted if someone went looking for problems. That lasted about 10 seconds before she realized I had clearly read enough to know exactly what was going on. Then the tone shifted. She said it was not serious. She said it had only happened a couple of times. She said the wedding planning had made her feel trapped and she needed space. The explanations came out one after another, each slightly different from the last. I listened until she finished. Then I told her something simple. None of the explanations mattered anymore. The engagement was over and she needed to pack whatever she had at my place and leave tonight. I also told her that after she left, I would not be continuing contact. No discussions about fixing things, no post-breakup drama. Just done. For the first time that evening, she actually looked irritated. Not sad. Not ashamed. Irritated that the situation was not unfolding the way she expected. Nina did not argue for very long once she realized I was serious. For about 5 minutes, she walked around the flat collecting things with the kind of sharp, irritated energy she usually reserved for customer complaints at restaurants. Drawer after drawer opened and shut. Shoes went into bags. Makeup disappeared into her case. Every movement looked like she wanted me to react. I did not. I stayed in the living room and answered a couple of work emails while she packed. The silence seemed to bother her more than if I had yelled. At one point, she asked if I was really going to throw away 4 years over something that was not even a real relationship. I told her calmly that she had already thrown it away when she decided to start another one. After that, she stopped trying to negotiate. Around 40 minutes later, she dragged 2 bags to the door. Before leaving, she turned back and asked what I planned to tell people about the wedding. Her tone suggested she expected some kind of mutual cover story. I told her the truth was simple enough. The wedding was canceled because the relationship ended. That answer clearly annoyed her. She said I did not need to make things dramatic and that adults usually handled these situations with a bit more discretion. Then she added that embarrassing her publicly would just make everything messier than it needed to be. That was the last thing she said before leaving. Once the door closed, the flat went completely quiet. It felt strange at first because Nina filled space even when she was doing nothing. Music playing, phone calls, commentary about whatever she was scrolling through. Without that noise, the place suddenly felt twice as large. The next morning, I started dealing with the practical side of the breakup. The first call was to the small venue we had reserved for the ceremony. We had not paid the full balance yet, but the deposit was non-refundable. I canceled anyway. Losing the deposit was still cheaper than pretending the wedding was still happening. After that, I contacted the caterer and the photographer we had spoken with. Most of those contracts had not been finalized yet, which made things easier. Then I called my parents. That conversation was short. I told them the wedding was off and that the relationship had ended the night before. They did not push for details right away. My mother just asked if I was sure about the decision. I said yes. By the end of that afternoon, the wedding that had been planned for months effectively no longer existed. With the wedding canceled, the next thing I dealt with was the trip. The whole idea behind it had been simple. Nina had spent months complaining that our lives had become boring and predictable. According to her, I was too structured and too focused on work. So I booked a long weekend in Lisbon as a surprise. Flights, a small hotel in the center, and a dinner reservation overlooking the river. The total had come to just over $2,200. 3 days before the breakup, I had been planning the moment I would show her the tickets. Now I was canceling them. The morning after she moved her things out, I opened the airline confirmation email and checked the refund policy. Normally those cheaper tickets lock you in completely, but when I booked them, I had added a flexible option out of habit. My job involves a lot of schedule changes, so I usually pay the extra few dollars without thinking. That small decision saved me. During my lunch break, I called the airline and canceled both tickets. After the service fee, most of the money went straight back to my card. The hotel was even easier. Their cancellation window was still open, so one short email later the reservation disappeared from their system. Within 2 days, almost the entire $2,200 was back in my account. At that point, I assumed Nina and I were finished with each other permanently. She had her life, I had mine, and the cleanest outcome was simply no contact. For a while, that seemed to be exactly what happened. About 2 weeks after the breakup, a mutual acquaintance from her office ran into me at a coffee shop near my workplace. We were not close, but we recognized each other from a couple of work events Nina had dragged me to. He asked if everything was all right between us, because apparently the situation at her office had turned messy. According to him, Nina had started openly seeing the same coworker I had seen in the messages, Lewis. The relationship had become office gossip almost immediately because neither of them was very discreet about it. The interesting part was what happened a few days later. Nina owned a fairly new car that she was extremely protective of. She talked about it constantly and treated it like a status symbol whenever she met new people. One night she apparently let Lewis drive it after they left a bar. He crashed it. Nothing catastrophic, but bad enough that the front end was damaged and the car had to be towed. The part that made people at her office talk was what happened after. Instead of staying to deal with the situation, Lewis apparently left the scene and disappeared. Just like that. At the time I heard the story, I remember thinking the situation sounded almost absurd. I had not spoken to Nina since the night she left my flat, and I assumed whatever chaos she had going on now was no longer my concern. I was wrong about that part. After hearing that story, I went back to my normal routine and tried not to think about Nina anymore. My life had already started to settle back into something predictable. Work, gym, quiet evenings at home. The wedding plans were gone, her things were gone, and the constant tension that had been sitting in the background of the relationship was gone too. For about another week, I heard nothing. Then one afternoon something unusual happened at work. I work in the administrative wing of a hospital network office building. It is not the type of place where random visitors wander through the halls looking for someone. Most people who come in already have appointments or security badges. That day I was finishing a report at my desk when the receptionist called my extension. She sounded slightly confused. She said there was someone downstairs asking for me by name and insisting it was urgent. When I asked who it was, there was a short pause before she answered. Nina. For a second, I honestly thought she must have the wrong person. Nina knew exactly where I worked, but she had never shown up there before, even when we were still together. She always said office buildings like mine felt depressing and bureaucratic. I asked the receptionist if Nina had said what she wanted. Apparently, she had only said she needed to speak with me for a few minutes, and that it was important. I told the receptionist I would come down. When I reached the lobby, I immediately saw her sitting near the entrance. The first thing I noticed was that she looked completely different from the last time I had seen her. Not physically different, but the attitude was gone. The usual confident posture, the sharp expressions, the sense that she was evaluating everyone around her. Instead, she looked tense. As soon as she saw me walking toward the desk, she stood up quickly and started talking before I even reached her. She said she needed help. The explanation came out in pieces. After Lewis crashed her car, he apparently disappeared almost immediately. He stopped answering her calls, stopped responding to messages, and within a few days he had taken time off from work. No one at their office seemed to know exactly where he was. The car, meanwhile, was still sitting at a repair shop. The damage was expensive, and the insurance situation was complicated because Lewis had been the one driving when it happened. Then she finally got to the point. She asked if I could help her cover the repair costs until she sorted everything out. That was the moment I realized why she had shown up at my workplace. For a moment, I honestly thought she was joking. Nina standing in the lobby of my workplace asking me for money was not a scenario I had ever imagined, even during the worst parts of our relationship. She had always been extremely proud of her independence and her income. One of her favorite habits was reminding people that she never relied on anyone. Now she was standing in front of me doing exactly that. I asked her to explain the situation properly. The repair shop had already inspected the car. The damage from the crash was worse than she expected. Front suspension, bumper, and part of the frame alignment. The estimate was several $1,000s. Her insurance company was still reviewing the claim because Lewis had been driving. From what she said, they were questioning whether the policy would fully cover the accident. Meanwhile, the repair shop wanted confirmation that the bill would be paid before starting the work. Lewis, on the other hand, had completely disappeared. He stopped answering her calls the night of the crash. He stopped responding to messages from coworkers. According to Nina, he had not even shown up at the office since then. No explanation, no updates, nothing. While she explained all of this, she kept glancing around the lobby like she did not want anyone hearing the conversation. Then she got to the point. She said she needed help covering the repair bill temporarily. Once the insurance company sorted everything out, she promised she would pay me back. I asked her why she thought I would do that. She hesitated for a second, then said that despite everything, we had spent 4 years together. She said she knew I was a decent person and that I had always helped her when things went wrong. That part was true, but it was also exactly the reason I had ended the relationship when I did. I looked at her for a moment and told her something very simple. I said I was not the person responsible for fixing problems created by the man she chose to replace me with. Then I told her I could not help her. Not with the car. Not with the insurance situation. Not with anything else. Her expression changed immediately. The same irritated look from the night she packed her bags came back for a second, like she could not believe the situation was not bending the way she expected. But this time I did not stay to argue. I wished her luck sorting out the situation, turned around, and walked back toward the elevators. That was the last conversation we ever had. When I got back upstairs, I expected to feel something dramatic about the whole interaction. Anger, satisfaction, maybe even regret. Instead, it mostly felt like closure. For the rest of the afternoon, I went back to work and finished the report I had been writing before the receptionist called me. Hospitals do not slow down just because your personal life used to be complicated, and honestly, the routine helped. Numbers, purchase orders, supplier contracts. Simple problems with clear solutions. By the time I left the office that evening, the conversation with Nina already felt distant. I assumed that would be the final chapter. About a week later, I learned how the rest of the situation played out. One of Nina's coworkers sent me a message out of the blue. The same guy who had mentioned the crash earlier. Apparently, the whole story had continued spreading around their office because the situation kept getting worse. Lewis never came back. From what people heard, he had quietly resigned and taken a job with another company in a different city. No explanation to Nina, no offer to help with the car, and no involvement with the insurance claim. As far as anyone could tell, he simply removed himself from the problem entirely. The insurance company eventually decided that the coverage would only pay a small portion of the repair costs because of how the accident had been reported. That left Nina responsible for most of the bill. Without going into all the details, it was expensive enough that she apparently had to take out a loan just to get the car fixed. On top of that, the office gossip about the whole situation did not exactly help her reputation at work. When two coworkers start dating publicly, and one of them crashes the other's car before disappearing, people tend to remember it. The strange part was realizing that none of this information actually changed anything for me. A few months earlier, I would have felt pulled into the situation somehow, like I needed to understand every detail or figure out if I could still help solve it. Now it just sounded like someone else's story. And the more distance I had from it, the clearer one thing became. Walking away when I did was easily the best decision I made that entire year. After that day in the lobby, Nina and I never spoke again. For a while I half expected another message or another attempt to contact me. Nina had never been someone who handled rejection quietly, especially when things did not go the way she planned. But weeks passed, then months, and nothing ever came through. No texts, no emails, no unexpected appearances. Eventually, the situation faded into something that just felt like a strange story from a previous chapter of my life. The canceled wedding ended up being the cleanest break I could have hoped for. We had not combined finances, we did not share property, and most of the wedding contracts had been early-stage deposits that were easy to close out. The only real loss was the small venue deposit and a few planning expenses, which in hindsight felt like a cheap price for clarity. The refunded Lisbon trip money ended up sitting in my account for a couple of months before I used part of it for something else entirely. Instead of a romantic trip, I booked a short solo holiday later that summer. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet few days away where I could reset after everything that had happened. Looking back, the strangest part of the whole situation was how predictable Nina thought I was. She had written it directly in those messages to Lewis. As long as she acted busy and slightly annoyed, I would back off. For a long time, that had probably been true. I avoided unnecessary conflict and preferred to solve problems calmly rather than escalate them. What she did not expect was that the moment I had clear proof of what was happening, the decision would be immediate. No arguments, no negotiations, no dramatic attempts to win her back. Just the end of the relationship and a locked door behind it. The irony is that when she eventually showed up asking for help, she was still expecting the same version of me she had been relying on for years. The predictable one who would quietly fix the problem. Instead, she met the version who had already walked away. And honestly, that is probably the most useful lesson I took from the entire experience. Sometimes the cleanest response to betrayal is not revenge, confrontation, or endless explanations. Sometimes the most effective thing you can do is simply remove yourself from the situation and let the rest unfold without you. Bye-bye.